In all forms of media, comedy is a universal appeal. Throughout the human history, everybody has and will continue to like it, and I'm not just talking about the comedy genre in media specifically, but more so the art of cracking jokes and making people laugh regardless of platform or tools. And this case especially applies when media is made up with escapism in mind. What with the bullshit running around the world these days and how fucked up it's becoming. I mean, the world has always been fucked up for a vast majority of people, but the difference then and now is that finding something to laugh at is much more accessible in the present. So yeah, perhaps in some objective way, the world is becoming a better place for many reasons. Back then, the forms of entertainment and laughter normal peasants could find was a night at the bar, watching some good old fisticuffs or other variants of sports, and the nobles and kings had personal entertainers, including that of the sexual variant and personal jesters. And in terms of profession, jesters are perhaps the best parallel I can compare the Gremlin with. They're funny and can make fun of anything, yes, theoretically anything, provided they actually decide to have the balls, and because jesters were the only ones back then that were allowed to make fun of the royalty. They are caricatures, but at the same time they're intelligent, can play with one's psyche, and overall give someone a very much good time. Depending of course if you're the viewer or the victim. Weebs and degenerates, today we're going to be talking about a very common and interesting trope. One that's very popular for good reason, but one that's relatively easy to pull off if the VTuber in question is no stranger to dicking around and being a general bitch in the internet. Which I would say is most people if they've lived through the 2010s era of the internet. This is a kind of VTuber that exists in literally every agency and every corner of VTubing. And even if you've only been here for a couple months, you're going to be able to identify them quite easily. This is the Gremlin trope. Again, a trope that I'm sure you are very much familiar with and may actually be a trope you're a fan of. And first, let's define what constitutes as a gremlin. A gremlin is a small, imaginary, or mischievous spirit that causes problems that are unexplainable. But a while back, this used to be something of a massive insult or even a slur in some places. But of course, the VTuber industry has an interesting phenomenon of turning terms that are supposed to be an insult into terms of endearment or compliments. Not a thing exclusive to the industry of course, but I imagine it plays a role. These days, the term gremlin has a rather whimsical tone to it, now referring to the people that are somewhat annoying or troublemakers, but not to an extent that they necessarily piss people off, but instead in a way that's charming, or childlike, or cute. Which makes sense because most gremlin VTubers you know probably have those traits that are almost childlike or cutesy. Be that a high-pitched voice, tendency to cause chaos, absolute cheekiness or smugness, says a lot of not good things that works in contrast to their VTuber model to exploit gap moe, their skills in bantering and putting people down, and most importantly, their motherfucking laugh. Now, all these personality and character traits overlap with a lot of tropes, you might have noticed. They're not really exclusive to one or more VTuber tropes. In fact, they're very much in common with literally most other tropes. And that is because the Gremlin trope is one of those that are more so character trait modifiers than anime archetypes similar to the hag. To further explain this, there are three types of VTuber tropes that I've talked about in this channel that I haven't necessarily properly described. Those types are anime archetypes, roles, and character modifiers. Anime archetypes are the VTuber tropes that follow the tropes that are so common in anime. A couple months ago, I've tackled these kinds of archetypes like the mommy, the loli, the tomboy, the onesan, or the ojo-sama, which are tropes I also plan to talk about in the future. Roles are basically tropes that I've observed in many group, agency, and fanbase dynamics that fit a prerequisite. Tropes that basically give them a role to play in a group setting, and who they are and what they do according to the fanbase. These tropes are the leader, the powerhouse, the heart, or the poster child, which is another trope I plan to talk about in the future. Character modifiers are tropes that is present in every VTuber regardless of their archetype or their role. Like the name implies, these are tropes that modify a character, an add-on to make their personalities pop. As an example, the hag, the say-so, the schizo, the lewdtuber, the gremlin, and yet another topic I want to talk about in the future, the menhera. The combination of a selection of all these three types of VTuber tropes make up the foundation of literally every single VTuber under the sun. This is the science of the VTuber tropes and what makes a VTuber work. But the thing is, not every VTuber trope mixes well with each other. The leader is gonna struggle with their leading and bringing people together if they have a character modifier of being a menhera. The heart ostensibly wouldn't be an emotional core at all if they were the schizo. The loli being a GFXer would be the death of your career if you're not Japan-based or if you give a shit about what Twitter thinks. Meanwhile, there are also tropes that work well with each other and even amplifies the effect of the modifier. The mommy being the lewd tuber works and is in fact quite lucrative and the common goal for a lot of VTubers to do. The lolly being the menera is hilarious, and the tomboy being the hag would be absolutely criminal. Brother, that combination would legitimately kill people. In fact, that's a gap in the market. Why hasn't a tomboy hag appeared in Holo-en or Niji-en or V-shoujo yet? In any case, the reason why I brought up the concept of combinations is that the Gremlin is one of those character modifiers that can work well with literally anything. No, seriously, think about every role, every anime archetype or subtrope that you can think of and why it having the Gremlin modifier would be detrimental to it. You'd probably never find a trope that would make it bad if they're a Gremlin. The least a combination with their Gremlin could do is that there are probably other better alternatives, but it's not necessarily harmful. And that's not exactly surprising. There are many reasons people go to VTubers, and they all have to do with their preferred types of entertainment. The appeal of the trope in general is that they are essentially cute little bastards. They are mischievous, energetic, and almost innocent in their annoyingness, but adorable in their genuineness. For many people, it hits the same spot where when you have an annoying fucking dog that keeps breaking your shit or a cat that knocks stuff over, making your life a lot less convenient, but they are still so cute and innocent that you genuinely cannot be too mad at them. Basically, they're smug little creatures that always causes mayhem to many people and has a sharp tongue. You know that they are annoying, but you also know that they're not really evil or malicious. They are playful, making jokes in the expense of others with a genuine sense of innocence, without necessarily meaning to hurt other people and just to have fun. Because of this, Gremlins can also take advantage of their appeal when they do eventually get serious, hitting critical levels of gap moe when they decide to drop the prankster mode and get down to earth with their fanbase. They also have another advantage, and that's the fact that they can literally say anything in a joking manner and not suffer the consequences, depending of course on their background and what community they have. Gremlins are often excused for banters that normally get frowned upon by some demographics, giving them the avenue to shit on people that aren't normally shitted on or make jokes about topics that aren't usually joked about. That's why I brought up the jester reference earlier. Of course, this isn't 100% guaranteed, as in certain cases, Gremlins can face repercussions when they take a joke too far, but the plus side here is that when the fanbase knows you as a Gremlin, any Gremlin can pull off an "I was only joking" or "I didn't mean or intend for that to happen" and get away with it. In some cases at least, because when people know you as a Gremlin, people won't take much of your words too seriously unless you drop the act for a bit, or you talked about something that was too far. And I suppose that's the negative aspect of being a Gremlin. The fact that people get used to your words having not really that much weight, even at times where you sometimes drop the act. You're always looked at as the jester, having this constant pressure to keep making funny jokes at either the expense of yourself or others, and to a certain extent, those kinds of jokes stop hitting hard or start getting annoying. That's why it's just a character modifier and not a role. Being funny is not supposed to be who you are as a VTuber. That being said though, not all Gremlins are actually the same. There are two types of Gremlins that I can actually think of on top of my head, and these two definitions aren't necessarily hard drawn, they're more so on a spectrum, and almost all of them has a cute little evil laugh. They are the Hobgoblins and the War Criminals. Let's try to define these two. The Hobgoblin is a term I coined for VTubers who are constantly in goblin mode. A term, according to Oxford, is when someone becomes unapologetically and self-indulgently lazy or greedy in a way that rejects societal norms or expectations. While Hobgoblins in the VTuber context doesn't necessarily mean when a VTuber goes this heavy, it's born from almost similar circumstances. It is when a VTuber superficially doesn't really give a shit and does what they want with little regard for everyone and everything around them. I say superficially because in reality, a lot of VTubers actually do care about what people think about them or is careful to make sure that their lollygagging doesn't go too far. Not to say that I mean all VTubers are like this, of course. I do think there are those that genuinely do not give a shit, but mostly they do. These are the types of VTubers whose punchline is that they don't really give a shit about what people say or do, making them do some really hilarious pranks or say some jokes typically at the expense of those around them. The War Criminals, however, are very mischievous and seek trouble themselves, going out of their way to genuinely inconvenience and commit atrocities. War Criminals are people that actively try to do bad stuff, in contrast to Hobgoblins who do things just cause and don't really give a shit. Nope, the War Criminals do care, and they care about causing chaos. In circumstances where their morals are tested and they are offered options to do things that has good or bad endings, they often go for the bad endings. In video games and roleplays, they often do things that are morally bankrupt and commit actual criminal shit, all in the name of having fun, whether that be committing genocide, slavery, human experimentation, mass shootings, nuking places, name a crime, any sort of crime, and the war criminal gets excited at the idea of doing it. But one of the most fun aspects of the war criminal is when their karma goes back to bite them in the ass. Some war criminals seem to be cursed, or maybe in this case gifted by the universe, so much so that the universe tries to counter their evil with its own brand of justice. Whenever a war criminal like, say, Pecora, who I think is actually the first notorious example of this subtrope, goes on to cause some mischief that involves hurting or inconveniencing other people, their plan goes awry and often backfiring in the most cathartic way possible. This is absolutely hilarious, perhaps one of the best situations for slapstick comedy. Some goofy Looney Tunes, Roadrunner, and Wile E. Coyote shit. And I think this is when the Gremlin archetype is at its best. While it is funny that the target of the Gremlin is suffering and damning their name, curse you Usada Pecora style, it's another level of comedy gold entirely when the Gremlin themselves are suffering payback and the consequences of their actions. All of these facts has led to the fanbase of the Gremlin to be generally light-hearted and even not so romantically parasocial to the Roshis, giving them a distinct feel to the regular fanbase and even making them a lot more appealing and safer to have for many VTubers. Fans of the Gremlins are also gremlin-like for the Roshis, and even bully them in occasions where they deserve it. As the saying goes after all, the chat reflects the streamer, and so in this case, they who are gremlins attract gremlins, or at least the fanbase goes full of gremlin mode when their Oshis are in too. Again, the gremlin is one of the most common and popular trope. Their tendency for chaos and general appeal makes them clippable, and as such, invites more avenues to grow faster and further than more niched VTuber tropes and groups out there. I would actually probably advise that any other VTuber agency and VTuber group should have at least one gremlin, as it's not just good for the universal appeal, but also because it acts as a balancer between different VTuber tropes. Someone that can lighten the mood of any situation in your group composition and generally be a good balancer to your party. There are different types of comedy in the VTuber scene. Toilet humor, dark humor, edgy humor, all of these are welcome depending on the niches and the fanbase you've cultivated. And as a trope that directly taps into a universal type of humor, and even is the reason why the VTuber scene got so popular in the West, the Gremlin is a timeless classic, and as long as many people can enjoy slapstick and fun little harmless pranks, people will always enjoy the company and the cute villainous laughter of a Gremlin. And yeah, that's the Gremlin trope for you. Go check out the second channel for more content beyond VTubing, and for more VTuber tropes, like and subscribe, even comment down on the trope ideas you'd like me to tackle. And yeah, that's about it. See ya!